The crew did not know what happened. In fact, what had happened, they'd flown into a tornado. They couldn't see it though because they're in cloud. And if you look at that picture on the right-hand side, that's pretty much what you see in cloud, nothing. The captain, unsure of what was going on, elected to apply full power and get out of there. They didn't know what was happening. They moved into the only clear airspace they could find out to the northeast of Perth and went into a holding pattern. In the meantime, there's a frantic call from the flight attendants saying they've got to get out of their seat. The response? No effing way. But they said there's two passengers. I've got to get that right. I mix that up when I go to work, call the passengers patients and the patients passengers. But anyway, I worked that out. Two people laying in the aisle, bleeding profusely from the head. And we need to get them back in their seats. Okay, you've got 60 seconds, do it. So now, we're still in the holding pattern. And the unfortunate thing is that the thunderstorm has now moved right over the airport. The crew are faced with some pretty tough decisions. There are no good solutions. The aircraft is damaged, passengers are injured, and we can't land at the airport. It's pretty tough. But the holding pattern is working for the time being. They were thrown a lifeline. Air traffic control said the storm is slowly moving away, conditions are improving. They're bad, but they're not very bad. Because what's going through the crew's mind at this stage is fuel. We can't stay up there forever. So what do? You are now faced with making a really, really risky, tough decision. How do we do that? Well, the options at that stage were run out of fuel, crash into the mountains. That's not going to happen. If the fuel state gets so low and the conditions at the airport are so bad, discussion was had about flying off the coast over the Indian Ocean and ditching in the water. Not ideal either. The final option was to land in the storm where you have wind shear, violent turbulence, torrential rain and low cloud. What do you do? How do you find a solution to that? The crew elected to risk it with the approach and landing to the airport because it had cleared a little bit. They're flying down final approach. 90 seconds from landing, the weather conditions are beyond the limits of the aircraft. They persist. 40 seconds from landing, the wind has dropped enough, still cannot see anything. In fact, the crew couldn't hear themselves think because the rain was so loud on the windscreen as sheets of water went over the window. 15 seconds before landing, they got one glimpse of one light. It wasn't the runway, it was the approach light. 10 seconds before landing, the runway started to appear out of the gloop. And they landed with applause from the cabin, and as they taxied off, the first officer was shaking. They survived what was almost an impossible situation. There was no simulator training exercise to prepare them for that. There was no checklist. There was no procedure. What they needed to put together was a combination of their flying skills and their human factors skills. It was only those two together that got them out of that situation. That was one of the toughest flights I've had.